Marchese di Barolo. Okay? Marchese di Barolo is one of the oldest states and what happened is that this is actually this is a rather informal start to proceedings from Nelson is still pouring, but we'll be off soon. I'm really excited. We did this event yesterday in San Francisco with the same wines. We have some bonus wines there actually. So when we finish this, Nelson and I will be pouring a bonus wine, Sandrone, behind the bar because we can have enough space on the sheet. So come up and say hello. We'll have a chat and we'll pour you some wine. But it went pretty well yesterday, didn't it? So far, today. We've learned how to pour wine, but he knows he's a sommelier. He's been on the floor a lot. Tell them a bit about your experience.
Okay, so hi guys. So first of all, thank you so much for the trust. Probably you know about Jamie. Probably most of you are like on wine courses. You probably have wine science in your library. If you don't, do buy it because it's one of those key books for all the wine geeks. So I used to work for many years in a place called 67 Pall Mall. Maybe you've heard about it. It's the biggest club for collectors in the world. We're in London, Singapore, Bonn, Bordeaux. We're now opening in Melbourne. We have a hotspot in Shanghai as well. No, sorry, in Hong Kong. And we're expanding. And I've been there as the event supervisor sommelier under Ronald Zaber, the head of the Court Master Sommelier Global now for around 6 years. And now I run with Federico Moccia, the Italian series. For the Italian series, a few years ago, me, Federico, which is now the head sommelier of 67 Pall Mall London, and Jacopo D'Osio, which is the head sommelier of the 3 Michelin star Piazza Duomo. If you've never heard about it, it's one of the most legendary restaurants of Piedmont, if not of overall Italy, especially when you go to top restaurants, Michelin, especially everybody will mention Crippa as one of the greatest chefs in the world. So we started doing this thing because we talked about Barolo a lot, but we were starting doing a lot of series on single beers. And both the trade and consumers were coming to us asking, yeah, but we don't understand in which context these vineyards are. What do I mean by that? Every time I say Clos de Bez, you know exactly that Clos de Bez is in the context, lives in the context of Gevrey-Chambertin. In Barolo, this thing has never been done before because the village section of Barolo is actually the less representative category that we have now. Think that when we started 3 years ago, the consortium gave us the list of Barolo del Comune produced, and they are around 80. Now we are over 100, and that happens like is a thing that you will see more and more and more. Why we started talking about it? We started talking about it because right now, probably for the money and the quality is the biggest bargain that you can have in Barolo today. Okay.
So just for the benefit of everyone, I don't want to assume too much. Could you just explain the difference between Barolo di Comune, and the Cruz?
Let me just... So, if you drink Barolo will come from anywhere that is Viserion. If you're drinking a Barolo del Comune can only come from blends within the communal appellation, which is the village. And within the village, because the Italians want to make it overcomplicated, you will have the Cruz, but the Cruz are called MGA, Menzioni Geografiche Aggiuntive. We're going to talk about it. Actually, this is what we have in plan. We don't know each other, right? So I don't know what is your knowledge, your current knowledge of Barolo. So what I want to do is a complete crash course on Barolo, starting from the most simple thing to the most complex. But rather than telling you, oh, this is Nebbiolo, this is how it works, I'm going to go through this story just through the gossips. Because I can tell you straight away, do you want to learn about Piedmont, do you want to learn about Barolo? You know exactly how easy it is to buy a Guild Sum subscription and just read through the study guide. But there are tons of things that are not in there. And I would like to guide you through that story, through the gossips and the histories of the areas. Does that sound cool?
Yeah.
Yeah? So... we'll start with the most boring ones. Barolo is clearly 100% Nebbiolo. The key that people sometimes forget is that Nebbiolo is a high vigor variety. Nebbiolo was never supposed to make great wines. The reason why it was planted there is because it makes tons of grapes. Because back in the day, Piedmont was, I'll give you an idea, Barolo was called back in the day La Malora. If I have to translate La Malora in English, it means the worst of all evils. there's a literature book that talks about how rough it was to live in Barolo. Okay, it was terrible. And the more stories, I have so many stories. We're gonna go through it.
And this is so interesting because it's like with so many wine regions, we kind of think the wine region today, and we know the wine region has been there a long time. And we assume that what we have today is a continuation of the history. But often the fact that some wine regions are famous are kind of economic accidents or logistics, like Bordeaux, for instance. You know, Bordeaux is fantastic. We love Bordeaux, but it's largely an economic reason that Bordeaux became so famous. And then you look at someone like Rioja. Rioja today is just an accident of phylloxera, where in phylloxera, everyone from Bordeaux, all the enologists, because they had no grapes, moved down to Rioja, which is, so, and it's fascinating to think that we're talking about a region where we think of Barolo as fine wine, when economically this was an impoverished region.
One of the most
Nebulo's planted because it creates enough wine so people can drink wine. It's a staple.
And actually, one of the greatest things that happened to Barolo or the area of Piedmont Cuneo is not Barolo, it's Nutella. So most of the people could survive because of Nutella.
Nutella.
Yeah, it's the spreadable. Just to give you an idea, when Nutella is some of the biggest coming of employees. The village of Novello, where probably now you drink Ravera, and you think, Claudio Cogna, so cool. In the 50s, in Novello, hail destroyed 90% of the crops for 4 to 5 years in a row. And everyone left the Novello to work on Nutella, a Ferrero.
The man who started Nutella died today.
Oh, really?
97 years old.
Probably, I have. And imagine how much money you got in. But yeah, I'm gonna talk through all this. We got a lot of time, so you see. Quickly, is thin skin. There's a bit of particular thing. When I think about thin skin varieties, I never think about high tannins. But like Barolo is one of those, Nebbiolo is one of those varieties in which, yes, you have the pale color, but you have a lot of like tannin pigmentation in it. And it's early budding and late ripening. Now, how do we see in a blind tasting, usually Italian wines, they tend to have like a garnet rim. So when you kind of tilt the glasses, you will see that even if they are ruby at the center, the rim is always significantly garnet, depending on clearly the style and the extraction. The structure is always dry, medium to full body, high acidity, high tannins, high alcohol. What I would like to focus more is the aromas are pretty much classic Italian clusters, but it's good to go back to them because when we're talking about the communes, I would love for you to think after the end of today, that each one of these clusters is actually connected to a place. So in every single village of Barolo, one of these clusters is way stronger than the other. So you always have tart red fruits, sour cherry red plum, and also like that kind of like wild strawberry red currant. Volatile acidity and oxidation are huge. So you'll see pretty much later. I'm going to talk about it. Roses and violets, tea leaf and dried herbs, spices, licorice, anise, resin, clove, cinnamon, tar, leather, and truffle, mushroom, dust, and earth. We're going to taste enough to understand all these aromas in them. Just to show you, we've done a thing for you because also Jamie is here. So I see this tasting as me sometimes talking and like imagine you're at Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and you have one phone call from home and it's Jamie Goode. So you're a millionaire by default. So what we've done is that we asked all the producers to give all the analytical data of the wines because it will be really important, especially for a few features about the vintage, to actually understand what's going on in the wine. If I have to, because we don't have 60 hours, we can talk about two people for the history of Barolo. Sorry, one and two. Number one is Camillo Benso Conte di Cavour. He was at the time of the king, one of the prime ministers, was the prime minister of Italy. And in 1832, he wanted to work on the agriculture of Italy. He wanted to implement new stuff. And he had like this guy called Stagliano that was working with him. He was a really famous agronomist that wrote some books, but not happy with it. He took the consultant of a Bordeaux wine merchant. Okay, and this guy that was called Louis Godard became quite famous because when he started these studies in Grinzane Cavour, in Cuneo, in the area of Barolo, and at the time the whole area of Barolo was all property of the Countess Colbert Falletto. And what happened was that she knew about this French consultant, and he brought him in, and with his knowledge of Bordeaux technology, they bottled the first Barolo, 1844. The King of Italy knew about it, and because these bottles were getting to be famous, the king required to have a selection of barrels, at least to have one per day. So they shipped out 365 barrels of Barolo. They weren't like big boats, yeah? So back in the day, they had like a sort of a is really weird. You know when you go into the airport and there's the check that it becomes like from small to big and then becomes small again? Similar kind of barrel. You can only see it in the first wine that we're going to drink, which is Marquise di Barolo. If you ever go there, you'll see it. It's one of the weirdest shapes I've ever seen. So now you need to think, oh, the King of Italy likes Barolo. Everything is, super famous. In reality, no. Barolo becomes really famous because of the king, but then it just goes down. Why? Because it's too tannic, sometimes it's too green, the acidity is too tart, so literally nobody wanted to drink it. So just to give you an idea, if in the 40s, 50s, or 60s you went to a Barolo producer, you probably went there to buy Dolcetto. And what they will do, they will give you for free Barolo because you bought Dolcetto. So that was the consideration. Huh? And that works for every kind of producer. Huh? Even the top producers of today that were like historical, they were giving Barolo away for free because nobody wanted to drink it. And we skip straight away in the 80s. I will tell you the history as a legend as they told them because it's like an apocalyptic vision. And this guy, I don't know, have you ever drunk a wine from Etna called the Tenuta delle Terre Nere? This is the owner. He's a guy called Marc de Grazia. In the 80s, he arrived in Barolo, they say with a van packed with barriques. And what he did was like, he knocked at the door of everyone and said, okay, this is a barrique. If you put your wine inside this, I will buy all the content of this barrel. The world then divides it in two. A set of people said, no, my granddad didn't like that, so we're going to keep on doing this. But a bunch of people started following his suggestions, and these guys now are incredibly famous. Like probably heard of Roberto Webb, you heard of Chiara Boschi's, you heard of all those guys, Paolo Scavino. And they were the first one. Elio Altare, which was the boss of the movement. These guys, they became with him the Barolo Boys, and that's where the U.S. started buying tons of Barolo. Before that, Barolo wasn't on the radar of anyone. So Marc de Grazia brought Barolo here, and because of that, the region exploded. Okay. So how the division arrived? The division arrived based mainly on barrel choice and maceration choices. So the first choice is what we call the traditionalists. The traditionalists are using big barrels. We're talking about 25, 50, they can go even higher, hectoliters. We call big botte. And the macerations were really long. Okay, it could be months, 2 or 3 months also. Okay. Meanwhile, in the scene that Marc de Grazia brought on, many producers are buying a machine called a roto macerator, use it for 15 days, and then put it straight in barrique. But to be honest, Jamie, you're probably way better than me to explain what's the difference between these choices and how.
I think it's a very interesting distinction because you've got a situation where you've got a grape that naturally gives you high tannins but no color, and the market wants fruit, the market wants color. And the traditional Barolos, I think, these were quite hard for people to understand because you've got this extended maceration. The extended maceration is interesting because with extended maceration, rather than the tannins just keeping going up like this, what you get is the tannins go up, and then what you get is that after the fermentation, the post-ferment maceration, this might be 72 days. the tannins start going down again, which is bizarre because you'd be extracting more from the seeds, which are different sort of tannin. But what you then get is you get fining of the tannins by the pulp of that's present in the fermented must, the wine. And so the tannins kind of go up like this, and then they kind of go down like this. And it's like that. You see this mostly with skin macerated whites, yellow, so orange whites. And because what happens is they don't have the pigmented polymers, the anthocyanins, that bind to. So anthocyanins, normally in red wine fermentation, you get tannins, you also get anthocyanins. They bind together to produce what's called pigmented polymers, which is stable color. And the thing is that changes the mouthfeel of the tannins. So for whites, you do it, you can see it's really clearly because there's no anthocyanins, so you don't get this pigmented polymers. So you have a very more aggressive mouthfeel of the tannins. And so what happens is you'll see it in the whites that if someone does a 10 or 11 day skin fermentation for whites trying to make an orange wine, it's also very harsh and tannic. But sometimes 3 months or even 6 months can give you actually really quite a nice texture. And so with these Barolos, the extended maceration is a way in some ways of moderating the tannins. Another way of doing that is to have small barrels where you've got the oxygen impact from the small barrel. It's not a lot of oxygen, but it's much more than you get in the 2,500 or 5,000 litre bottle. So you get that oxygen and combining with the tannins. So what that's doing is that's fixing the colour, so you end up with dark coloured wines, and you also develop the tannins a little bit in the process of the barrel. So what would happen, I think, from a technical point of view, smaller Nebbiolo, more fruit, more colour, and then the traditional style obviously takes longer as well because you're going to be maybe 2 years or 3 years in these large botti. It's a slower process, there's less oxygen coming through, and you'll lose some colour. But that's the stark style between the traditionalist and the modernist. And you were saying yesterday there was a war.
Yeah, so like the thing is that like probably how many places you've heard in which this thing becomes actually the main theme? Because when we talk about Barolo in history, this is the main theme. I never heard about it, like of any other region that actually had a war on. And first of all,
I guess what you might have, I guess in Burgundy, what you have is you've got the sort of the jaillet and the moving away from whole bunch, and that's Piacad, that sort of style of cold, long, cold pre-ferment macerations making darker style Burgundy. And then now you've got the whole bunch of guys coming back. But there's a lot of in between, and also it's not like a war.
Yeah, exactly.
Stylistic difference.
Yeah. So when you talk about like, we're going to open up a bottle of Barolo from the 60s to 70s, you probably don't want to know how dirty that barrel was. Okay? So, but just to give you an idea, because it's really easy just to talk about this, but I think that the way to understand why this is a war, you need to understand what it means to be an Italian in that time till maybe 10 years ago. Any Italians in the room? Yeah, guys. So probably you know exactly what I'm going to talk about. So there are two things, like the mix of why people took it so seriously. Well, the first thing is like what World War II meant to us. Okay, because compared to Germany or Japan, we kind of kept on going in the sense that our thoughts and all the decisions and everything from football to politics, it was always a choice of being or a communist or a fascist. And it was so strong within our identity. Okay? And I remember when I was a kid, your granddad will take you there and tell you all the stories about World War II and make sure that you were from his specific part. Okay? So I remember my granddad coming there and telling me you're a communist. Remember, you're going to be a communist. And the communists of Italy were what you might think people that read Marx. It was really attached to the Soviet Union. Okay, so and people were the World War II was incredible for the Italians, how much suffering there was around. So clearly, people wanted to keep that memory alive. But the thing is that that went into anything, and so the division went that if you are a traditionalist, you are a communist, but if you are a modernist, you are a fascist. And the way they introduced the argument was based on the idea that we have also of Christianity. I don't know if you've ever been in a mass in Italy, But probably, if you've seen, I've never seen, now that I've been around the world a bit, I've never seen a mass like the one that I have in Italy, because 90% of it is just pentiment. Is you telling God, oh my God, sorry, I'm so sorry. And at a certain point, you're just like, I don't know what I've done, you know? Why do I have to be so sorry? I have no idea. And the thing is that for us, there's a famous sentence connected to this by the famous Avvocato Agnelli, the guy that owned the Chateau Margaux and Fia at the time. And what he said was like, in Italy, people will forgive you for murder, for corruption, but they will never forgive your success. Because if you are famous and you make money, you are going far away from Jesus, because Jesus was poor. And so the idea is, this is the Barolo of the poor. So you are a communist. But this is the Barolo of the rich. So you're a fascist. And on top of this, you need also, so for every region of Italy, everyone from any region of Italy as a sort of like background, okay? So, and if you're from Piedmont, there's a way of saying that they say, which is a Piemontese falso cortese, which means if you're from Piedmont, you use false courtesy to seduce your adversary. And the reason is that maybe you think about Tuscany, okay? So Tuscany, historically, was like a really, for the majority of it, a really united region, okay? They were into expanding plans, so they were always like fighting to get as big as possible. Piedmont, when we're talking about these communes, you might think, oh, you know, this was a thing that everybody was happy. No. These guys were fighting like incredibly hard between each other, okay? I'll give you an idea. So in Monforte d'Alba, back in the day, there were the heretics. And the heretics were like all them moved toward La Morra. But then the guys of La Morra, they didn't want them there, so they called the church to kill them all. It was still, if you ask certain people from the 40s and 50s, if you were from La Morra and you were dating a girl from Verduno, it was a problem. Okay? So, and there's a joke that I always say that they told me in Piedmont that I think actually gave you precisely the idea of what it means to be from Piedmont, with all the respect. But the joke goes like this: a producer from Barolo goes inside the vineyard and he found a lamp. He picks up the lamp and he cleans it, not because he thinks there's a genie in it, it's just because he wants to sell it back so he can make some money out of it. And while he cleans it, the genie comes out. And the genie tells to the Barolo producer, today is the greatest day of your life. Because whatever is your desire, I will make it real. There's one caveat though. Whatever you ask, your neighbor will get twice as much. And without even thinking, the Barolo producer says to the genie, chop off one of my balls. And because one of the historical reasons and of Piedmont is that you need to make sure that your neighbor will never be rich as you. And out of this rule, I can tell you 50% of the vineyards acquisition. Think about it. Can you tell me 10 major international groups that have bought land in Burgundy? I'll tell you, you cannot. Because when a land is parcelized and divided by family, it stays within the family. Let's do the same thing in Barolo. I can name 15, 20 major groups. Why is that? Because rather than giving it to a part of your family that you hate, you sell it to someone rich from outside. So, and you can find thousands of these examples, okay? And this all comes down to being from Piedmont. Okay, the thing is changing now, so the new generation doesn't have that strong attachment, and this is the reason why Barolo is evolving as a region. Because back in the day, it was a fight between one group towards the other, with internal fights inside the groups. Today, there's a group of producers, maybe divided in two macro groups, that are trying to reach the same objective, which we're going to see today. And these are, I don't know if you've ever seen this. I love this. These are tavas. They're like ceramic amphora. So they don't have the terracotta flavor to it, but they have the same oxidation of a tonneau. Okay? And this is bloody Domenico Clerico. Domenico Clerico used to make like 100% new oak, high toasting, like barriques as well as possible. And the wines were like so oaky. And you will see now how the wines of Domenico Clerico are now. So we're going to drink one today. So now, let's talk about how
Before we do that, so
Yes.
when you say it's fair to say that there was this big divide between the traditionalists and the modernists,
Mhm.
but now we're in a we're post that phase.
Yeah.
So you've got people doing a bit of both.
Yeah. So the thing is that like whatever piece of oak you are using or whatever maceration you're doing, the objective is still the same and styles are really similar. And we're going to drink pretty much some of the biggest protagonists of the change of Barolo. That's why probably you never heard any of the producers that we're going to drink, but this is what we are drinking in Italy. Okay, these are some of the producers that are really pushing in the market. Now, this is the map of Barolo. First point, this map is correct by 85%, which is great for a wine region. Okay. Probably I will change a couple of things here or here geologically, but it's pretty perfect, to be fair. Like calculating all the maps that you might see around. Now, this is not the map that people thought originally. The map was way bigger. It included two more communes. It included the commune of Roddi and the commune of Signo. Now, Roddi, you might see that there's still a piece here. We call this Bricco Ambrogio, which is a single vineyard. So why? Because Roddi is huge. Roddi starts from the end of Verdun and captures all of that. So the reason was that in the 60s, this is how they told me the story. I think it's really fascinating. Imagine it's like Friday, it's the end of the working week, and it's raining. And it's already 7 p.m., so it's freezing. So what happened was that the call, when the mayor, the institution that made the map, called the guys at Roddi to come at this night, Roddi said, we're not interested in Barolo. We're just like, well, why? Why should we be interested in Barolo? We sell Dolcetto, which is the greatest wine of Piedmont. So what happened was that at the meeting, the farmer that owned Bricco Ambrogio was there. And he asked the commission to actually add it, and they gave him the production granted to add that small part of Roddi. More funny is what happened here, because the legend tells that the mayor of Signo just came out, he saw the rain, and he said, it's not important.
But they're potentially good vineyards.
Very potentially good vineyard. I mean, they were still both in Roddi and in Signo. They're just like the original expansion, like the original map of Barolo. So there's one guy that's called Drink Wise Not Label, but there's a thing called Outside, which is the Barolo del Comune of this area. So maybe next time I'll bring it up. Now, probably you all seen a map of the cruise of Burgundy, right? So can you tell me what a fucking mess this is? Right? You see what a mess this is. Okay, I'll tell you why. So do you see that, for example, here Saralunga, they're all like small crews? Yeah. Here they're patched out. Here there's a bit bigger, and here they're monstrous. So the idea that you have of Burgundy is exactly the same idea that they had in Saralunga. But the idea is really simple. Barolo emerged at two different times from the sea. The first part we call it Tortonian on calcareous marl and makes wines that are softer. What I mean by softer, I mean the tannins are going to be there and the acidity is going to be there, so don't think that there's going to be a walk in the park to drink those. But the wines tend to have like sometimes a bit more water in the mid palates, where a bit more, when we say watery, and the tannins sometimes they decay a bit faster. Okay. Meanwhile, if you want like the structure, the austerity, we have the sandstone of the elevation, which is, for the main communes, and we'll see later, we have mainly Verduno, La Morra, and Barolo here. And here we have Castiglione Falletto, Monforte d'Amba, and Serrano. Okay? We could go crazy on this. Maybe later, if you have any question, I'm more than happy to go geology crazy on it.
One question.
Yes.
The NGAs.
Yes.
And currently there's no sense of any hierarchical division.
Okay. Yes.
So it's everything's on a level. So you've got increasing parcellation.
Yes.
But with that, you haven't got, these are maybe the premier crews or the grand crews.
Yeah. So what happened is, one person did it. It's called Renato Ratti. So Renato Ratti, back in the day, did a map of Barolo with two categorie. So prima categoria is the grand crew, seconda categoria is the premier crew. The point is that the map of Renato Ratti, right now, for example, in prima categoria, he put a vineyard located here, and you can see it called De Villero. Villero today is a great wine. I wouldn't consider it a grand cru. So because like so many things changed here because of like climate change, because of stilistics, and so it's really hard today to say what is, especially because if the cruise, like, how can you say, oh, Busia is a Grand Cru? Busia is at least 37 to 45 parcels. So like, how can you say that? How can this be? Imagine you're here and you're here. How different your mind will be. How can you say that this is a Grand Cru? It's
So is
impossible.
this a bit like the situation in Champagne where the whole village gets Grand Cru?
Yeah,
And within any village in Champagne, it's a Grand Cru village, you have vineyards that are okay and vineyards that are fantastic, and there's no distinction between.
yeah.
So it's more marketing, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, there are certain bits. So, for example, if I have to say what is the greatest cru of Barolo, is a place called Rocche di Castiglione. And what I would suggest is, if you want, one of the best tours that you can do is, I don't know if you've ever heard of a producer called Brovia. So if you know Brovia, if you are in Piedmont, the thing that you need to do is call Alexis Sanchez and ask him, I want to do a tour. Nelson Pari told me that I need to do a tour with you of Rocche di Castiglione. It will be the greatest walk of your life. Get ready because it's Mosel style. So what you do is that you basically attach yourself to a pole and you just surf to the next one, okay? But it's one of the most breathtaking vineyards I've ever seen in my life, okay? Okay? You need to divide it in three parts, divided by altitude. The southern part is the one that most look like the commune of Barolo and not La Morra, because everything that is here is like more, it perfumes more of roses. And the more you go up, and the wine tends to be more La Morra style. Think about it also for a producer reason. When you are down here in Brunate, you have Francesco Rinaldi, Giuseppe Rinaldi, you go up and you start having the modernists. So you have for Boerzio, you have the old, and in the middle you have Ceretto and Marcarini. So we are like at the middle of the barrier school. And you see that from really light, the wines are becoming more and more extracted. And you know that you can only do that in the top part and not in the south. So that's how Barolo is really exciting, but it's really complicated because the map is a mess.
Wow.
Okay, so what we're going to drink today is Barolo del Comune. We're going to drink all 2021, which is the upcoming vintage. Now, quickly, I'm going to describe it. After a mild and dry winter, the vintage 2021 started with late budding and frost problems. A warm spring and summer moved the harvest to the start of October. Overall, we classify this vintage as classic. Now, it's important to understand what classic means, okay? Because the last three great classic vintages from, this new wave Barolo are 16, 19, and 21. They are not similar between each other. Why? Because they are keep on getting hotter and hotter. But the thing is that 2021 is the one that the most flirts with an arid vintage. Okay, it's just slightly there. If 2021 had a couple of heat waves, it would probably be a different kind of vintage. Okay. So when people are saying to you, like 16, no, and you will see today. Okay. I want to dig a bit more because I'm going to ask Jamie a thing, which is probably the key of understanding this tasting. Okay, so a mild and dry winter led to late budding at the end of March. On April 7th, a frost destroyed approximately 15% of the crops in vineyards located below 280 meters in altitude. A warm and dry spring with no significant risk of fungal disease was followed by a similarly warm and dry summer with minimal rainfall. There was only one brief heat wave at the start of August. The warm condition persisted into September, but were tempered by a high durable temperature range, allowing for balanced ripening. Harvesting began in the first weeks of October. Now, what the most important thing that you will read here is one, it didn't rain. Jimmy, would you tell us what is a slow fermentation? What happened when a slow fermentation is done with wild yeast? What are the problems? How can you solve it? How can you
So normally the dynamics of fermentation, which I'm sure you'll know, wild fermentation is the first few days carried out by what we call wild yeast, so non-Saccharomyces yeasts. So there's a mixed species of yeast, and they can cope with a little bit of alcohol, but not too much. So they'll work for a few days. And then Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is the yeast that does most of the fermentation work. And when you buy a packet of yeast, if you're inoculating, that will almost always be Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Then that takes the fermentation and carries it on. So that will take it up to dryness. And it's really interesting, this whole dynamic of the interplay between the wild yeast species and the Saccharomyces cerevisiae. In the old textbooks, they used to say that you don't get Saccharomyces cerevisiae in the wild, in the vineyard, because the presence is they're quite low. They're quite low, but they certainly are present because now we've got next generation sequencing. You can look at exactly what's there rather than relying on culturing to then decide what's actually there present in the vineyards. There are actually wild Saccharomyces cerevisiae strains in the vineyards. They'll come in on the grapes, but because the dose is low, it takes them a while to sort of get going. So what yeasts need during the fermentation process is adequate nutrition. Air helps as well. Oxygen really helps them. So if there's a dry season, what often happens is you might have low nitrogen in. So low yams, they call that yeast-soluble nitrogen. And that causes the yeast to be stressed. It slows them down. They don't build the biomass they need to carry on the fermentation. In this case, the fermentations, rather than cerevisiae going up and carrying on like this, they slow down. And when you slow down your fermentation, there's less carbon dioxide being pumped out, so there's more oxygen present in the fermentation in a way that can actually feed bacterial growth. And so what happens sometimes is you get the malolactic fermentation, which is bacteria, that starts going. Normally, that happens after alcoholic fermentation is finished. So in some of these wines, what would have happened is malolactic would have completed before alcoholic fermentation completes. And the danger with this is volatile acidity. So you really, when your fermentation starts slowing down like this, you're kind of like really a little bit concerned that the VA levels are going to creep up. And the wines just don't have that clarity that you'd expect from them. And so what Nelson was saying is that in 21 is not the absolute dream vintage that everyone's making out to be, because a lot of people struggle during those fermentations. And in some of these wines, if you're skilled at tasting these wines as Nelson, you'll spot that.
I'll give you an idea. Look at wine number 1 and look at the VA data. It's at 0.55. Look now at wine number 6. The VA is at 0.78. Which one do you think went through a wild fermentation? You know, and that's the important thing when we read those things. And I understand that we need to hype vintages and all, but you see right now with all the wines, because this is how crazy it is. VA sometimes doesn't only change the perception of the wine. In certain producers, it changes the styles. It's a shame that like I will suggest you, there's one producer that I will suggest you to find both these bottles to see how different they are, and just think it's just a fermentation that stopped, malolactic in, and then alcoholic end. Incredible. And the style is like, it seems a wine made by two completely different people with two completely different ideas. I will see it. So, can you raise your hand if you've seen those two bottles? Fantastic. So, do you know what in reality this is? This is a Barolo del Comune di Serralunga d'Alba. Do you know what really this is? This is a Barolo del Comune di Verdun. So, the category that we're going to see now is really famous. You know it already. The point is that people don't want to use it. They don't want to use it because they think that it's too hard to tell you what Monforte is, what Serralunga is. They think it's too complicated. But then there are many cases, many cases, in which people are using Barolo del Comune exactly for the opposite reason. There are a lot now of what we call in Italy gli imbottigliatori, which is people that are just buying the grapes, or they buy the wine already done and they just bottle it, and you find it in supermarkets at €9. So if you find it in a supermarket at €9, let me tell you that Barolo costs at least 1.52 euros. Okay? So people, to divide themselves, they just say, oh, maybe you know what we're going to do? I'm going to just put Barolo del Comune, so it's a bit different. So this is a category that probably is the most important right now. But they are just lacking that direction. But fortunately, there are a series of producers they really did such a great job. We're going to drink probably Cristante, which is wine number 2, but we're going to drink probably one of the most important things for today in moving people into doing Barolo del Cune. So I'll tell you how I made the selection. The selection is a bit of history, consultants, styles. So I can see, like when I see those wines, I see thousands of lines in which you can compare things. And I'll try to give you as many things as possible, but Jamie will guide you mostly through, how the wines are and how to read them. The only thing that I will put myself in, only apart from, describing the estate quickly, is to give you the most important thing of today, which is if a wine comes from there, is like that, okay? Which is the classic Burgundy thing. Don't worry for the picture. If you keep this, you'll find it on the QR code. We're gonna start with the first wine. Hello and welcome back to Wine. I'm Nelson Pari.
I'm Jamie Goode, and we're here. We've been doing seminars in San Francisco and in Los Angeles for the Wine Educational Council on Barolo.
And we talked about exactly about the vintage, about what is happening in the region today, all the history. And thanks also to the Veritas Trust for everything and to everyone that came to see us. It was a blast.
It was fantastic.